Speaking of climate change policy, I don't know if you guys saw this, but the governor of Illinois, who's a Democrat, who often talks a big game about saving the world from climate change, and using Illinois as an example, to lead by example on how to get things done. Well, I guess last week, the governor of Illinois vetoed legislation that would have made it easier to build nuclear power plants in Illinois.
You absolutely suck!
Saying this Senate bill removes the moratorium on new construction of nuclear power plants to allow for the construction of both advanced and traditional large-scale nuclear reactors in Illinois. This bill is vetoed because of the vague definitions in the bill, including the overly broad definition of advanced reactors, will open the door for the proliferation of large-scale nuclear reactors that are so costly to build. And why are they costly to build? To my knowledge, a big reason is red tape and regulatory hurdles. And they will cause exorbitant ratepayer-funded bailouts. Anyway, so that's how serious Democrats are about finding alternatives to fossil fuels. Even the Sierra Club applauded this. Applauded Governor Pritzker of vetoing legislation. The Sierra Club, this is one of those environmental activist groups. They've spoken in front of Congress before, warning them about the dangers of climate change. And then I looked into the Sierra Club, at least the Michigan chapter, because I just Googled Sierra Club nuclear power to see what their stance was. This happened to be the first page that popped up. They want a nuclear-free future. Again, this is an activist group that's all bent out of shape about climate change, and they're really concerned about the impacts. But they're opposed to nuclear energy.
Really makes you think.
Sierra Club remains unequivocally opposed to nuclear energy. Nuclear is no solution to climate change, and every dollar spent on nuclear is one less dollar spent on truly safe, affordable, and renewable energy sources. Help us work to phase out nuclear energy as quick as possible. So it's not just about preventing the building of new nuclear power plants for organizations like the Sierra Club. They want to phase out nuclear energy.
That's just not smart.
How's this working in countries like Germany, by the way, and Denmark? Who years ago, they were all celebrating, yeah, we're getting rid of our nuclear power plants. And we're going to go all in on wind turbines, and how's that working out, huh? Highest electricity prices in Europe, unreliable grid. Had their foreign policy compromised by relying too much on Russia. And then, you scroll down far enough, you'll see that they have this meme right here. Talking about for the price of one nuclear power plant, you only get electricity for 500,000 homes. Notice that they don't have any comparison for, I guess one wind turbine can power 4.5 million homes. Boy, do I look like a total goof right here. Clearly, I was not paying attention to this meme when it clearly says 3,000 wind turbines, and not just one wind turbine, as I said, are needed to power 4.5 million houses. But putting the obvious blunder on my behalf aside, I would like to add more context to this point. It might be easy for a casual viewer to come across a meme like this without any reference to how humongous these wind turbines are, and come away thinking that they're preferable to a nuclear power plant. According to the Department of Energy, a wind farm requires 360 times the amount of land as one nuclear reactor to produce the same amount of electricity. A recent article on the Washington Post estimates that the United States would need a state the size of Montana to generate its current electricity needs from wind energy, whereas the land needed for nuclear power would only take up one county in Idaho. Also consider the fact that Texas has over 13,000 total wind turbines, with a population of roughly 30 million residents amongst 10 million households. So by the Sierra Club's line of thinking, there should be more than enough wind energy to power every household in Texas. And yet, renewable energy is still a minor source for energy consumption in Texas. The Sierra Club also does not mention the fact that nuclear energy is largely expensive due to hurdles imposed by government regulators. In his book, Fossil Future,
Read a book, read a book, read a motherfucking book. Read a book, read a book, read a motherfucking book.
Alex Epstein likens the situation with nuclear energy to a software engineer who could produce at $200,000 a year, but is forced by the state to hire 5 security guards at $75,000 a year each for safety reasons. Anyway, apologies for the blunder, folks. I'll try better next time. And I think the Sierra Club, they're counting on you to be gullible enough to go along with their shenanigans. Say nuclear waste, water pollution. How's it going to pollute the water? Terrorism target? Everything is a terrorism target. Everything. What isn't a target for terrorism? And again, as I already established, by not having cheap, reliable energy, one source of which is nuclear power, especially compared to wind turbines, your foreign policy, your industrial capacity to produce, to defend your country, and to have a thriving economy, those are compromised. Habitat destruction, isn't that rich? Considering now you have Greta Thunberg going to wind turbine farms, wind farms, and protesting because they might upset the local reindeer population. Not to mention, wind turbines and solar panels have been documented to harm birds. Costly maintenance, same could be said about wind turbines. Single point of failure adds to climate change. Environmental injustice, whatever the fuck that means. Environmental injustice. I guess that's why government exists, is to protect the environment from human beings.
Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs.
Disaster waiting to happen. Even though nuclear energy is the safest form of energy known to man. High startup and shutdown costs. Yeah, again, thanks in large part to unnecessary government red tape. Philosophical Zombie Hunter says, Germany's lack of nuclear is threatening recession. Yeah, this is what years of warmongering has brought us. Just absolute insanity. It's not really about climate change. It's about reducing human impact on nature as much as possible. That's why they're opposed to nuclear power. Now, there are some better people who have bought into the climate scare. More reasonable people who are like, look, we should be thinking more about nuclear energy, which I think is a move in a better direction, at least. But that's why people are opposed to nuclear, because ultimately it's not about reducing carbon emissions. It's not about saving the world from climate change. It's about reducing human impact on nature as much as possible. And all this industrialization, all of these sources of energy are going to have some impact on nature. And even after all of these stories about Greta Thunberg protesting wind farms on behalf of the reindeer, and these stories of the Sierra Club opposing nuclear energy, which is a safe, much more reliable alternative than solar and wind, safe form of energy that doesn't put carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. They want to phase it all out. and stop construction of new nuclear power plants. If that was not enough, let's take a look at this New York Times op-ed written by Ezra Klein, which is not exactly Fox News. Ezra Klein is not exactly Tucker Carlson over here. But this was put up back in June. What the hell happened to the California of the 50s and 60s? Ezra Klein says, by the time I talked to Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, he was clearly frustrated. This is ridiculous, he said. These guys write reports and they protest, but we need to build. You cannot be serious about climate and environment without reforming permitting and procurement in this state. Unquote. It hurts to get hammered by your friends, and that's what's happening to Newsom. More than 100 environmental groups, including the Sierra Club of California, recurring culprit from what I can tell, 100 environmental groups, including the Sierra Club of California and the Environmental Defense Center, are joining to fight a package Newsom designed to make it easier to build infrastructure in California. For Newsom, it's a wounding break. Quote, I licked envelopes for these nonprofits as a kid. My father was on the board of the Sierra Club Legal Defense Fund for more than a decade, he said. This is my life. But this rigidity and ideological purity is really going to hurt progress. Oops. I did the climate bills last year, and these same groups were celebrating that. But that means nothing unless we can deliver. That was the what, this is the how, unquote. The environmental movement is dealing with a bit of a dog that caught the car confusion these days. Yeah, who saw this coming? Hundreds of billions of dollars are pouring into infrastructure for clean energy. By clean energy, they mean like solar and wind. And decarbonization targets that were once out of the question are being etched into law. That's particularly true in California, which has committed to being carbon neutral and to running its electricity grid on 100% clean energy by 2045. And again, by clean energy, they mean solar and wind. Gavin Newsom is not a big fan of nuclear energy. Hitting these goals requires California to almost quadruple the amount of electricity it can generate and shift what it now gets from polluting fuels to clean sources. That means turning huge areas of land over to solar farms, wind turbines, and geothermal systems. Yeah, huge areas of land. Going back to this meme on the Sierra Club. Talking about habitat destruction. What will taking huge amounts of land and putting solar panels and wind turbines, what will that do to habitats? Not to mention the people who could really benefit by privatizing all of this wonderful land. And again, I imagine that the Greta No Funbergs might show up to even protest some wind turbines and some solar panels after they read horror stories about how they kill a little too many birds or upset some local ecosystem or whatever. It means building the transmission lines to move that energy from where it's made to where it's needed. It means dotting the landscape with enough electric vehicle charging stations to make the state's proposed ban on cars with internal combustion engines possible. Taken as a whole, it's a construction task bigger than anything the state has ever attempted and needs to be completed at a speed that nothing in the state's recent history suggests is possible. You know, this sort of reminds me of reading the horror stories of the mid-19th century federally funded and mandated interstate railroads, intercontinental railroads that were built as fastly as possible, which led to a bunch of other problems. I want to be clear, I'm no fan of what Newsom and, by extension, the Biden administration are trying to do. I do think it's a little amusing that it's their environmental pals, their warm-mongering pals, their climate alarmist pals who are getting in their way. It's not just nuclear energy that they're opposed to. California has become notorious not for what it builds, but for what it fails to build.
You absolutely suck!
And Newsom knows it. Quote, I watched as mayor and then as a lieutenant governor, and now as governor, as years became decades on the high-speed rail. People are losing trust and confidence in our ability to build things. People look at me all the time and ask, what the hell happened to the California of the 1950s and 1960s? Well, I do know in the early 1970s, a certain governor by the name of Ronald Reagan may or may not have signed some consequential legislation known as the Environmental Quality Act. California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA for short. But Newsom's immediate problem is the Biden administration because it too has become focused on how difficult it has become to build, and not just in California. These days are pervasive at every level of government, federal, state, and local. John Podesta, a senior advisor to the President Biden on clean energy, said in a speech last month, we got so good at stopping projects that we forgot how to build things in America.
You absolutely suck!
Yeah, and of course, when all of this madness, when all this shit goes nowhere and makes our electricity grid more unreliable, more vulnerable to brownouts, makes it less efficient, drives up the cost of electricity, I can imagine a world where the who's who of socialist and economic fascist asshats blame it on unfettered, unregulated capitalism or privatization or whatever it is. I see this in the UK now. They passed a climate change act all the way back in 2008, which set up a government agency to regulate carbon emissions in the UK and all of that gobbledygook. And now that energy prices are becoming an increasing problem in the UK, now everyone's blaming it on privatization.
You absolutely suck!
The Biden administration is pumping hundreds of billions of dollars into decarbonization. Again, they're going to blame this on capitalism and neoliberalism and corporate greed. Hell, we saw this in Texas a couple years ago. We're seeing it in Texas now. I've read that the recent heat waves have caused energy prices in Texas to spike. A state for the last 2 decades has really embraced wind energy. Anyway. And it wants to make sure it gets a return on that money. So it is making states compete for federal grants, and one way it is judging them is on whether or not the state has made it easy to build. That has become an issue for California. We are agnostic as to where these investments go, Jennifer Granholm, the Secretary of Energy, told Silicon Valley Leadership Group. But California is competing against states that have done permitting reform, and they're making that case. Her advice was blunt, quote, whatever you can do to help bring the cost down to make yourselves competitive and to speed things up, I think would go a long way in making more manufacturing come to this area. Yeah, no big deal. We have the federal government with the power of the purse just telling all of these states how to operate. Hey, if you want goodies, if you want all this money, you got to do what we say. I think this was a problem that James Madison warned about when he talked about misinterpreting the general welfare clause. Adding to Newsom's problems is that California's recent surpluses have turned to deficits. Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, it's not amusing because mismanaging money is terrible, but Governor Gavin Newsom and a lot of Democrat cheerleaders over the years have been saying, oh, yeah, you Republicans think you're so good on economics, huh? Well, explain California. They're the 4th largest economy, and they have all these massive deficits. What do you have to say now? Or not massive deficits. They have massive surpluses, and these massive tax surpluses. What do you have to say now? Massive surpluses thanks in large part to corporate greed. And now they've turned to deficits because the capital gains taxes are not as plentiful as they were a few years ago. Talk about spiking a football after a first down. Anyway, he needs federal money and lots of it to make good on his climate promises. If California falls short on those grants, if it falls short of its goals, Quote, we're going to lose billions and billions of dollars in the status quo, Gavin Newsom said. The state cannot backfill that, and we are losing some of it to red states. I'm indignant about that. The beneficiaries of a lot of these dollars are red states that don't give a damn about these issues, and they're getting the projects. We are not getting the money because our rules are getting in the way. And where is Newsom on this? I don't see him, I'm reading about this in an article, but usually when I hear from Gavin Newsom, he's feuding with Ron DeSantis. He's complaining about other red states and other Republican politicians. He's trying to find ways to intervene in the economy in California. I don't really see him taking to task all of these climate activists and all these ridiculous rules getting in his own way. The breadth of the opposition and the emotion in Newsom's defense left me a bit unprepared for his actual permitting package, which is a collection of mostly modest, numbingly specific policies. When a lawsuit is brought under the California Environmental Quality Act, should all the emails sent between agency staff members be part of the record, or only those communications seen by the decision makers? Should environmental litigation be confined to 270 days for certain classes of infrastructure? This is the kind of shit we got to deal with in California, which ironically enough is getting in the way of their climate agenda. Should the California Department of Transportation contract jobs out by type, or does it need to run a new contracting process for each task? Should 15 endangered species currently classified as fully protected be reclassified as threatened to make building near them less onerous? And on it goes. I didn't know you could just easily reclassify this based on your political whims. Funny how all that works. This is not a root and branch reform of California's environmental protection bills. It does not follow recent housing reforms that use statewide planning process to bypass local governments. The proposed changes to the California Environmental Quality Act are arguably more modest than the changes made, with barely any notice to the National Environmental Policy Act as part of the debt ceiling deal. Much of the fight is being framed as a dispute over process. Newsom, as he often does, is pushing the package through an expedited process. It could pass in a mere weeks. The opposition groups say that moving it so fast excludes the public and stakeholders and avoids open and transparent deliberation of important and complicated policies. Think about that for a second. Think about this next time you hear these workplace democracy or democracy everywhere asshats who want to turn everything into a popular vote. Look how much of a nightmare this is, just getting new infrastructure built in California. And the opposition is, no, slow down. We really need to really debate about this. Newsom rolls his eyes at this. Those same groups, he said, had our back when we passed environmental bills last year through the same process. And those goals mean nothing without this. Yeah, it's as if power lusters don't really give a damn about process. A lot of these goons operate on an ends justify the means kind of mentality. I talked with David Pettit, a senior attorney at the Natural Resources Defense Council. His organization opposes Newsom's package, but he did not describe it as particularly consequential. He mostly sounded puzzled. Quote, I do not think this will let the governor go to the Fed and say, look how quickly we can build, unquote. Pettit has filed plenty of lawsuits under the California Environmental Quality Act.
What an asshole!
These fucking people. And he thought the courts would ignore Newsom's attempt to speed up the rulings. Quote, "It's the judges who determine if it's feasible or not," he told me. Unquote. And he seemed offended by Newsom's effort to short-circuit the process. Quote, "Wouldn't it be better to bring everybody to the table and go through the legislature?" he asked. "Get the environmental justice groups, the tribes, hash out what it means. It could be done in a regular session by the end of the year." Yeah, going back to what I said earlier. This is what more democracy gets you. You know, you want to talk about seats at the table. Again, this is the shit that Newsom brings about on himself. He's been trying to do this with the fast food industry. He specifically said, "Oh, I want to give fast food workers seat at the table by creating this new bureaucracy, this economic fascist bureaucracy that will negotiate wages on behalf of all fast food workers. Give the workers a seat at the table, the corporations a seat at the table, the franchisees a seat at the table, maybe a bureaucrat or two a seat at the table, and then they can all just come and hash it out together." You know, we can't let individuals freely trade and negotiate with one another. No. We need government bureaucrats to come and all hash all this out. There's merit to the argument that Newsom is trying to rush his package through the legislature, but it's also clear that the groups opposing his package do not want to use a slower, broader process as an opportunity to strengthen the package provisions. They want to use it as an opportunity to weaken or block Newsom's package. Yeah, so again, you know, it was asked in the chat earlier, these people are still opposed to nuclear energy. They're opposed to fucking everything. Any solution to climate change. Their solution to climate change is suicide, essentially. And even when it comes to solar and wind and all of the infrastructure, they get in the fucking way. The coalition's letter worries that Newsom's package reduces application of environmental review, that it would undermine the California Endangered Species Act, and so on. The California Environmental Justice Alliance sent me a statement that said, in bold type, "Requiring a court to resolve an action within 270 days to the extent feasible is harmful to low-income and environmental justice communities." Yeah, you know what else is harmful to low-income communities is a lack of infrastructure, lack of energy, cost of energy. As I've explained numerous times, lack of housing supply, which have driven up housing prices in California. Even environmental lawyers have emphasized this. But again, you know, they'll just blame it on neoliberalism or unfettered capitalism or whatever buzzword of the day is, corporate greed. If they gave any shits about low-income communities, they would be demanding for deregulation and more free markets so that we can get more innovation, more production, more free trade, which would increase the standard of living and improve the quality of life. You know, their concern is not low-income communities. It's the environment. It's nature. Here's the hard part. All of these concerns are justified. I'm not sure I agree with that, at least some of the time. Laws like the California Environmental Quality Act have been used to block countless harmful projects. They've also been used to block countless wonderful projects that would have benefited low-income communities. A faster, more streamlined process could make it easier to build solar farms and rail systems, but streamlining could also make it easier to build infrastructure that communities have reason to oppose. I come to this trying to care for and represent my clients who live next door to a proposed development and want a species protected and do not want more highways jammed through, Pettit told me. The claim Newsom is making is not that all development is good, but that all development has become too easy to stop or at least delay. Is he right? You could say it depends on the project in question, but policymakers have to set broad rules. The harder development is to stop, the likelier it is that bad projects will be built. The easier development it is to stop, the likelier it is that good projects will be blocked. Yup. It's a big problem in California, and we're suffering the consequences now with high gasoline prices, high energy prices, high housing prices. And now all of this infrastructure investment is getting all tied up. And even that oversimplifies it. Often the question is not whether a project is good or bad, but whom it helps and who bears the cost. A wind farm may be good for the state, but also a genuine annoyance to its neighbor. Yep, a lot of people have pointed that out before. With these ginormous wind turbines. I'm a little skeptical that Newsom's package is consequential enough to merit the controversy it has created. But the fight is not just about this package. Everyone involved believes that there are many permitting reforms yet to come as the world warms and the clock ticks down to California. Yeah, this is another irony. Going back, we need to slow down and talk all this out. These are the same people who are freaking out, telling everyone to freak out, how we only have so much time to save the world from climate change. Yet when it comes to clean energy, they're like, hold on, slow down a little bit. We need exactly 270 days to figure this out. We need more time to invite all these different pressure groups to express their concern. Can we just slow down a little bit? Can we slow down? We're running out of time, but apparently we have all the time in the world to deliberate over what kind of sources of energy and infrastructure we need to build to save the world from climate change. These are not serious people. I mean, they're serious in that they want to ruin your life. They want to subordinate you to the environment or nature. These are the beginning stages of a transition from a liberalism that spends to a liberalism that builds. It's going to be messy. Until now, progressives have been mostly united in the fight against climate change. They wanted more money for clean energy and more ambitious targets for phasing out fossil fuels and got them. Now that new energy system needs to be built and fast. And progressives are nowhere near in agreement on how to do that. Yeah, I'm sorry that's happening to you guys. But, yeah. So any questions or comments about that? If anyone is still a little... how could these people be opposed to nuclear energy? They're opposed to everything. Everything. Even going back to this segment, these people will make your life worse and then they'll refuse to take any responsibility.